And welcome back to another Red Thread podcast. I'm your host, Random Randy. And so today I wanted to dig into a little bit further into, the destruction worldwide, kind of picking up where we left off in the last couple of episodes. But this time we're going to look at the Western United States, specifically the Grand Canyon area and the area now known as Area 51. A couple of really cool things to look at here. And, just to forewarn you, at some point after we go through, the breakdown of where these old cities went or what happened to these seven cities or septicius, right? Where did all that go? Keep in mind some of the things I was pointing out in the last episode or a couple of the last episodes of how everything would have to be demolished in order to be reclaimed. Okay, I think that that's a very important kind of piece of this topic, of this subject, is, well, what is the point of this wholesale devastation, of these areas? We won't really get into solutions as far as how did this happen as of just yet. Okay. Was it conventional means, explosives, mining, so on and so forth? And that's going to be one of the key ones, is mining. Okay. And I'll pull up some stuff towards the end after we look at these areas and kind of point out to you what I think is going on here, and what has happened, prior to this last, call it, age of exploration, okay, in the 1800s. So going straight into the Grand Canyon, is the Grand Canyon under 450 years old? Um, in my book, it's a great possibility. It does not show up on maps prior to 400 years ago. Okay. And so we'll jump right in here. We had a conquistador named Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. Okay. I agree with the writer of this thread that this is a questionable figure. Okay. He went looking for the Quivira regnum, or the Quivira region. Okay. And instead of exploring the Pacific Northwest, where all of the maps were pointing to, he wound up going to what is future central Kansas. So what happens is he meets up with an Indian, the Spanish called the Turk, oddly enough, and looking into Tartarian lore and possible history here in America. That's interesting in itself. His Indian guide was called the Turk. Okay. So that's just one little odd thing, that's popping up. So Coronado goes searching, and instead of going to the area that is labeled out here on the West Coast, Quivira region, he winds up somewhere over in near here we go, near Kansas. Okay. There's a map up. So if you happen to be able to pop on the video there on Spotify, go for it. Otherwise, odyssey.com/@redthread podcast. Okay. So instead of going to the west over here, he winds up going all the way over here into Kansas. Now that's interesting in itself, and you'll see why when I pull up the map showing the different cities in the United States area on these old 1500-esque maps. Okay, this is a picture of Coronado, supposedly. Gotta love the gold helmet, right? And all the little jewelry. Fantastic. Love it. It's beautiful. Okay. Anyway, he sets out looking for the seven cities of gold, which were also known as the seven cities of Cibola. Okay. Now, those seven cities of Cibola, we will see in one of the maps I'm going to pull up for you here in a bit, as soon as I can find it. And, I had this all pulled up and figure out. Here we go. Septem Citia, the seven cities. Okay. Now, something I'll point out here up front about these seven cities, is a simple thing. I was like, well, sept. What does sept mean? I wasn't sure if it meant 7 or 9, based on our calendar. So I went ahead and looked at the definition. The definition of sept is a division of a family, especially of a Scottish or Irish family. Found that very interesting, considering you look at some other information out there pertaining to was America populated by Irish in the past, right? We have the Church of Ayesa. We have a lot of different things that are giving us concepts and ideas that maybe, there was a Caucasian, not just Caucasian, but possibly, I don't know if you want to call it proto-Irish. I mean, I don't know what you would call, our ancestors anymore. We've got so many different names and, nomenclature for these things. But sept is a division of a family also, okay? An anthropological clan or a group that believes itself to be descended from a common ancestor. So that being said, keep that in mind with the redheads, traveling all around the world, spreading Christianity. Was this part of, what we've are coming to kind of understand as the millennial kingdom? Were the Irish a big part of moving Christianity around? Possibly, but I found that very interesting that sept it can mean a branch of a tribe or a nation. Keep in mind that we also have the Tartarian nation kind of flowing into the United States here also. So, the fact that it's been isolated and stuck into a corner that says, no, this is Scottish or Irish, it kind of speaks to me, but I don't know that that would be 100%. Okay, so sept, division of a family, Scottish or Irish family. Okay, coming from a Gaelic seal, meaning progeny or seed. Okay, clan with members who bear the same surname and are inhabiting the same territory. So that was an interesting one in itself for me. Make of that what you will. And let's take a look real quick at Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. Okay. He's a Spanish conquistador, expedition between 1540 and 1542. Now, 1540 and 1542. Let's go take a look at this map. Circa 1648. So this is even 100 years later. And this is what's kind of confusing and gets kind of interesting. Now you go in here and you look at this area, right? Cavera region, which is basically West Coast. Okay, the entire West Coast is kind of outlined as that here on this map. Okay, now the reason that I find the Grand Canyon so interesting is because in these maps, from even 100 years after this supposed expedition's a whole nother story. If you want more on the expositions, I recommend going and take a look at the Great Deception podcast. He's just absolutely nailed it on those expositions. So go take a look over there. Shout out to Matt. But anyway, okay. We have New Cibola over here in the area of, I don't know. It's really hard to say with the dimensions of these maps. But let's zoom out a little bit. That'll give us a better idea. It almost appears as though there was a secondary mountain range somewhere unless you want to look at this as maybe the Rockies are here. But we have like a northern lying mountain range, which I don't know if that's as far north as like Canada. I wouldn't say so. I would say this is probably, the Black Hills, North South Dakota, so on and so forth. But we've got a couple of interesting things to look at here. And one of which I couldn't help but notice is the land of Axa, or possibly Anya. And being from Southern California, I'm familiar with a place called Anaheim. So, coincidence? Possibly, But anyway, let's focus on these lakes right here, okay? We have a massive lake, which later, if I'm not mistaken, winds up being Salt Lake. Now, something to note is this inland waterway here that comes all the way from New France, or from the north of New York there, through where the Great Lakes possibly kind of originated. Of course, they look very different in this map. Now, move it on down, bring it on over Appalachia over here. Okay. Now, New Cibola, we've got New Mexico, rather, Cibola here, Cibola here, the 7 cities, okay? And they're all along this river here. Now, there are a couple of other maps that we're going to take a look at. One's right here for you. And this is a 1600 map. Now, on the 1600 map, we have Axa or Anya in a completely different place. All right. And it's right around where, Arizona might be today. Okay. But the seven cities branching around what is now, to my understanding, this would be like the Great Salt Lake area. Okay. So, and each of these cities on old maps was designating a city with, the typical city structure, possibly walls, fortifications. But mostly when you're looking at cities, you're looking at population of 10,000 or above. That's the general kind of consensus. And, I understand, not wanting to uh, be part of the consensus kind of bureau, but we'll just point out that we're looking at cities of 10,000 or more, generally speaking, when we have these city icons. Okay. And they're all medieval-esque, Middle Ages-esque looking buildings. We'll call it old world. Now, Cibola, okay, is an area here, the seven cities of Cibola. Okay. So this was obviously populated. This was obviously heavily populated. Okay. Um, focus on these inland waterways here, meaning you can come all the way from the East Coast, all the way clear over to right about Middle America here. All right. Very interesting stuff. Now we go over here and we have Canada. We have Hochelaga. Okay. Which, from what it looks like, was the predecessor of Shilaga, or the post, nomenclature. All right. Very interesting stuff. Hichelaga. Okay. Hochelaga, Hichelaga. So a couple of cities up there in the, Chicago area. Now we've got, just tons of infrastructure going on through here, through, what we're told was not populated very heavily, until far, far later. So I just can't point out enough these seven cities right around the Salt Lake area. Okay. So instead of sending him up here where the Grand Canyon is now, he got sent over here for some reason. So we have notes on his expedition through here, the Coronado expedition. We'll have to do a different episode on these expedition notes. I've been looking through, very interesting stuff. So if he would have come up here towards the Grand Canyon, he would have seen the Grand Canyon and reported on it. But for some reason, his guide takes him elsewhere. By design, personally, I think so. Okay. So the Grand Canyon. Now, John Wesley Powell is a U.S. soldier, geologist, and explorer of the American West. This is whose expedition I'm reading the notes on right now. Okay. He's famous for his 1869 geographic expedition, a 3-month river trip down the Green and Colorado rivers. And now, something to note is this gentleman was responsible for naming the Grand Canyon. Okay. For most of the names, it was the Great Canyon before it was the Grand Canyon. And the interesting part is in 1540, supposedly by Francisco here, our boy, Francisco Coronado. All right. This is the one who supposedly found the Grand Canyon in 1540. Now, the reason that doesn't make sense is because it doesn't show up on maps in that time period. So, take that for what you will. Okay. I don't know if you guys would like a little detail on the Grand Canyon lame stream, description, but there it is. You can pause it up and read right on away. So hypothesis is that this, was created or came to be 5 to 6 million years worth of erosion from this river here. The river of which is not on any of these maps that I'm going to be showing you. So very interesting stuff. Also incredibly interesting that no Grand Canyon, but what do we have in the place? We have lakes, we have rivers, we have towns, and we have cities all throughout the what is now high desert area of the Western United States. So moving on. 1776, the Grand Canyon was seen for the second and third time. Okay, that's just after the Revolutionary War, Declaration of Independence, the starting of our new historical timeline. Okay, so no other notations or details about the Grand Canyon between 1540 and 1776, including this map here, which still includes Cibola, the Seven Cities, Anya, Totontiac, okay, another Cibola. So more than one Cibola, the Seven Cities, right? Okay. Now, John Wesley Powell is the name given to this gentleman who went on that expedition in 1869. Note, I don't know if he's missing a hand or if he is just another one of our boys with that hand hidden. Anyway, something that we will get into later on at some point is this catastrophe that happened right about 1650. It seems to be that it happened in 1666, oddly enough. Now, so it's many folks' opinion that the Grand Canyon simply was not there in 1540, which is why our boy Francisco got sent over towards Kansas. Now, kind of a diversion, right? Like, hey, go over here, take a look at this, stay busy, right? And so it's interesting. With our timeline being so screwed up, it is possible that the events of the 1650s took place in the 1750s. So does that mean Columbus maybe discovered America in 1592? I don't know. Based on this map, America primum detecta e Christophore Columba eo 1592. How about that? Ad ab Americo Vespurio Laetitius retecta at 1599. Okay, so there's some interesting little tidbits that are pointing us in a direction of a different time. Now, these folks are fantastic at manipulating our concept and understanding of certain time periods in order to push or pull things further or more recently into the past or future or present. So that being said, okay, there's another part of the expedition, or not the expedition, but there's some reports of different areas that are destroyed. I mean, we've got a lot of events that are noted in literature taking place around this time, destructions. I mean, just insane stuff going on, okay, throughout the 1700s. So, that's a hypothesis, is that this time shift happened. Okay, that's a big part of why the confusion. Okay, so moving on to look at Coronado here. Okay, we have a couple of sources mentioning the seven cities. There could be more. The maps are a big one, right? A lot of people will say, well, these map makers didn't know what they were talking about. They're crazy, blah, blah, blah. I believe otherwise. These folks were, top of their profession. Okay. So anyway, Coronado has a rumor of a native called the Turk, that there was a city of plenty of gold called Kivara located on the other side of the Great Plains. So he heads on over there, doesn't end up finding anything. Okay. I think he probably did find some things. You look at the expositions in places like Indianapolis, not Indianapolis, drawing a blank. I'm thinking Oklahoma or something. There's a couple in the Midwest that took place just way out of place, massive, massive structures, so on and so forth. So let's take a look at some more of these maps from the era here. So, all right, this one we have Chilaga here in this area. We have Totontiac, okay, which is in the general area of Cibola here. All right, but look at this. We have three different rivers, a couple of which are no longer here in later maps. But Cibola is there. So this one not quite as detailed as some of the others, and we'll move right on here. Okay, Cibola there once again, Chilaga. Okay, so again, you would think that there would be some kind of notation for such a massive structure. All right, this shows Cavera further into the west coast. Okay. So it gets kind of confusing. You start looking at these maps. Um, and, Tatantiac here, Shakusco, Anya. So stuff is moving around. Is that by design or what? This one says 1492. Perhaps this was written up a little later on. But it's very interesting the way stuff shifts around on these maps. But thing to point out is a lot of these things don't go away. Cibola, it's still there. Okay. Where it lies on the map itself is not necessarily the point, but it exists. Chilaga exists. Okay. These exist in all of these maps. Now, it would be important that you would have maps detailing the areas that you were setting sail to or trying to get to, especially, if you are a mariner. And that's what these maps seem to have been used for, as everything along the coastlines detailed, everything inland, not so much, unless it's a major thing. All right. Like Cibola. And again, we have the Andean region, which is up like more north towards like Alaska area here. This is the Bering Strait. This is from the circular map, that we'll get into another time. It's a pretty epic map. But anyway, the Bering Strait. Okay, so Alaska, Kavara could possibly be, the Alaska, Washington. I mean, we're talking everything up here from Mendocino, maybe. Okay. So, just pointing out that there are remnants of these types of names still existing, in what we look at when we see cities on a map today. So that being said, let's jump right back in here and take a look a little bit further. Coronado's expedition. All right. This is a book I'm looking at now, detailing the tales of a Tartar king called Tartarex or Tartarax, meaning King Tartar. Okay. And it goes on, and I will include a link to this book here, and you can get it on Google Books. Take a look. All right. Detailing this endeavor that he goes on. Okay. In the end of March 1542, Francisco fell from his horse in Tiguex, and the fall fell out of his wits, and he became mad. He just went crazy, I guess, after falling off a horse. Maybe, or was he, being purposefully, kind of silenced? Very interesting concept here. So, and all these folks were going off of what they had at the time, which was like the notes of Marco Polo. I don't know that this Marco Polo ever existed, or anyone else in history for that matter. It's all kind of a hot mess. But this is what we can take a look at now. Now on the Urbano Montes map, which is a very famous map. It's a big circular map detailing all of the world essentially. And over here near Cavera, they have, the Juveria Sistano alla Campagna a modo de Tartari. Okay, does this mean this is where the Tartarians were living? Why they're showing them in teepees? I don't know. Is that possibly because the American Indians, as we know them, are actually of a Tartarian origin? Possibly. So, very interesting stuff. Where did all these cities go? What the heck happened? Now, based on some of the destruction I've shown you in previous episodes, it's not a far cry to think that these entire areas were leveled and reclaimed. Okay. And in the process of leveling and reclaiming that, you would need to wash all of the material that you are mining, however you're doing it, with explosives. Are you doing it with hydraulic mining? Are you doing it with an electrolysis method or an electrical method? Okay. And these are things that are up for debate. I'm open to any suggestions on how this could have happened, how all of these cities could have been just utterly leveled, decimated, turned to dust, basically. If you ever look at a Google map image of the high deserts in America, they look very much like something called mine tailings. Okay. And that's really what I wanted to kind of get into. But we will take a look first at a couple more maps, and at an area called Groom Lake, or Area 51. Okay. So this is a hypothesis. Area 51, a salt lake, much like Salt Lake City. Salt Lake, huge, right? I probably should have pulled up the Google map of the area, but it's probably looking just like this. Oh, wait, here we go. How about that? Isn't that nice when you go take a look and there's the links for you, because it's an epic set of threads called Stolen History. Okay. So let's go take a look at Groom Lake real quick. We'll get that bad boy pulled up and see what we can see here. Groom Lake coming right on up. Appreciate y'all's patience. But I really do feel like it's very important to understand the capacity of, whatever the eye of the pyramid is, whatever that control structure, whatever the tippy top of that control structure is it a far cry to think that this could not have been just devastated by these people? So something that I'll point out here is, you see all these lower lying kind of salt flat areas. These would have all once had water either flowing through them or have had water flowing through them. Okay. Zooming on out. And what do we see? This entire area here, Rachel, Nevada. We have a place called Goldfield up here, Las Vegas. These are all within the general area of where these 7 cities of Cibola would have been. Okay. Going all the way on up to Salt Lake City. Now you can see how massive Salt Lake used to be. Okay. Where did all the water go? You ask yourself, that was in these areas. Well, once they divert this river that would have come down through Colorado, that is no longer there. Again, you don't see a river going all the way out to the East Coast anymore. Okay. We just don't see that. Of course, everything now is covered with green, right? Over here in the Midwest, it's all farmland, so it's nice and green now. But there is, I'm actually pretty familiar with, in the Iowa area, there are underground aquifers that come through here. Okay. So that being said, no more river flowing from east to west uninterrupted. All right. That's not there, at least not that we can see, but we can see the remnants of rivers that would have come down into Yellowstone, right? Yellowstone being another hot topic area, right? Very interesting geologic things going on here. And Yellowstone National Park has a lake in it too, remnants of a lake anyway. So these entire areas here that we see, these very, Lichtenberg figure type of things going on, remnants of lakes in certain places. These, in my opinion, would have been the sites for these old cities of gold. Okay. And if you have the resources, which the people at the top of the pyramid or person or whatever it is do, they have the means, guys. They have the suppressed technology. They have everything they're not showing us. Use your imagination. You see what has come to fruition in the last 100 years. Now imagine if it was uninterrupted and unadulterated, what we would have available to us. Flying technology, anti-grav technology is not out of the question. All right. So, Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve. Wow. Wonder what laid waste to this area. So I'm just taking you guys with me for the ride here. And just amazing. Amazing stuff. Okay. So heading back on over Boise, Idaho. But you see the nature of this area. It's pretty well barren, right? Even if we go down in and look at some of these little towns, which might take a moment to pull up, we see that this is being irrigated artificially all around these areas. Okay. So the water's all been manipulated after the fact to bloom these areas again. Sheep Mountain. Okay. I always wonder about these mountains. right? I'm not with the whole everything's a melted building, but a lot of these are strange. They're very strange. The layering of the rock, the way that everything is washed down means that a lot of this material that's at the bottom here came from up here somewhere. You could see it has flowed down. Okay. So, again, it's just a theory. Don't get all, irritable or whatever when people start talking about things that are out of line with the mainstream, you know, situation. Okay. So back to Area 51. So, Groom Lake, another dry lake bed, exceptionally flat, right? What they have going on underground, we know that there is something going on underground here. That much we can be relatively sure of. Now that begs to, the question, what's going on with the mountain that's near here? Was it a destroyed area that used to sit right on this lake and have a beautiful city and everything else? Okay, something to point out is lead and silver were discovered in the southern part of the Groom Range in 1864. Okay, the English Groom Lead Mines Limited Company financed the Conception Mines in the 1870s, giving the district its name. Acquired by J.B. Osborne and Partners and patented in 1867. That's talking about the interests in Groom. So the land rights. Okay. And his son acquired the interest in the 1890s. Claims were incorporated as two 1916 companies, with mining continuing until 1918 and resuming after World War II until the early 1950s. Now, the airfield in Groom Lake began service in 1942 as Indian Springs Air Force Auxiliary Field and consisted of two unpaved 5,000-foot runways. Was established, and the test facility established in 1955 by the CIA Project Aquatone and the development of the Lockheed U-2 reconnaissance aircraft. Okay. So North America went through very serious geological transformations. I haven't quite hit on, the vast things that have happened in North America. I could probably get into that another time, but if you can see based on the maps that we're looking at, compared to this, right? Compared to what I was just showing you on the Google map, I think you would agree that something happened to all of these areas, these 7 cities. Now, were they only 7 cities, or were they, the sept that I was speaking of earlier? Were they of Irish origin, maybe? Okay. It's a possibility, guys. It really is. These maps I find incredibly intriguing. I don't know if, AI is throwing them out there for us just to take a look at and kind of be confused, or if we're being used to write the new narrative, whatever the situation is, or if we really are digging up our past and presenting it accordingly. So, that's up to interpretation. Personally, I prefer to look at these cartographers' work as just that work. These people spent their lives doing this, and, to have this kind of detail showing the difference between mountains and trees or forests and cities. Okay. So there are some forests in these areas that may be like the national park areas that we have today. Many national park areas may actually be covering the remains of some of these cities, whatever maybe they weren't able to mine out. But how did the Grand Canyon pop up just out of nowhere, right? Very interesting stuff. This is another interesting thing. The 1592 Christopher Columbus notation on this map. Very interesting. Okay. All of the decimation, destruction, and everything throughout the 1700s in many areas, not just in the US. Okay. Europe, Africa. Okay. 1755. I mean, it's madness, guys. Absolute madness. So, all this destruction, how could this happen? We went over the war in the air a little bit. We went over some of the pictures of the destruction. Okay. Now I want to go ahead and kind of notate a little bit of what could have happened to this material, right? We see that they know how to destroy things and break things down. All right. But then the reclamation, the reclaiming of the area, that would necessitate, you send in some surveyors in there to see what you're dealing with. Personally, I think that they sent these surveyors in much after the fact, after everything was already mined out. Here's an interesting one here. Okay, the 1740s to the 1760s show a massive inland sea here in what is probably, the Dakotas. But I mean, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. Okay. And that's on the tail end of the 1650 to 1740s maps with all of this area kind of blocked out. So 1740s, 1760s, big inland sea here and the mountain ranges are different. Okay. Very interesting stuff. And then we see 1760s current, this map coming about. One cohesive mountain range. Now, I just got to point out, if you had areas on both sides here of this mountain range that you wanted to reclaim, you would need somewhere to throw all that crap. I'm not saying that the entire mountain range, stone and all, is part of this, but one thing I'll point out is if you're using an electric or energetic method of moving earth, you might be able to pull this off. Okay. We'll get into technology for creating earthquakes and seismic disruption another time, but it seems to me that something happened. Something drastic happened in North America over the last few hundred years, 400 years maybe. Okay, going from California as an island, no notations of mountains, just a massive little lake here. I mean, it's crazy to look at this and think that these cartographers were not crazy. They were not wrong. They were not misled, but they were portraying what they found. Okay. So it appears as though there was a discovery prior. So maybe in the end of the early 1600s, there was a discovery happening. And then once it was all discovered, maybe in the late 1700s, that's what this revolution, this war was about, was these resources here in Western United States. Okay. Now, it's just wild. So we have some representations of what we're told the cities of gold might have looked like. They look very, Teotihuacan kind of thing. But what if they were not like that? What if they were massive Romanesque cities with gold domed buildings, and and you're going into these areas and you see these places with these old world architecture and they're beautiful, but oddly enough, they are what you would think are savages living there, right? And they don't speak English, and they believe in a higher power that is not exactly your own. Now, something I'll point out is when I'm looking into the literature on this expedition, there's a lot of tons of notations about the Jesuit order and them, basically delegating some of these tasks to these explorers and things. Okay. So there's an organization behind the scenes there, and the Jesuits definitely seem to be a part of it. So the Turk tells them to go to Kansas area, which, like I was saying on these maps, the Kansas area being somewhere around here, we find cities: Chilano, Walatino. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities. What would be in the Midwest? A couple of rivers here. What do we have? The Rio del Santos. I don't know about that river. The Rio de Caranvial. Okay. I don't see the Mississippi, guys. Is it over here? Oh, it must have been named something different before, right? See? That would look like the Mississippi to me. But I don't see the river name. So these maps are incredibly interesting. And, I, for one, really feel like these cities existed. Okay. Naguatar, Lacane, okay. Rio de Magdalena, okay. So a lot of these rivers don't exist anymore or have been renamed. But again, the topic here that we're looking at is the Western United States. Rio St. Lawrence doesn't exist anymore. Okay. Caligula, very interesting, very similar to Caligula. Have places been, had the names adopted and turned into historical figures just to keep them in the story without disclosing what they really are? I think that that's a great possibility. Okay. So something I'll point out to you here on the end of this video, we'll keep it relatively short today. Mining generates large amounts of highly concentrated wastewater due to contact between water and various types of minerals. The origin of these effluents can be found in the distinct processes undertaken in mining, in addition to drainage from rainfall. Mining effluents can be caused by wash waters, flow process acids, water leaching, flotation and concentration, and effluents from refining and gas scrubbers. Meanwhile, rain that infiltrates the tailings of the mine can cause oxidation. Now, here's an important thing. Oxidation will create in an iron-rich soil rust, giving you a red color, okay, that we see throughout the Western United States. Okay, produces a highly contaminated wastewater. Is this what created the desertification of entire just regions? Personally, I think so. Okay. The effluents produced are of diverse compositions. Okay. Some are more or less soluble, some are hydrolyzable, some aren't, some are sorbent or non-sorbent. So, huge consequences. All right. And water chemistry. That's why these areas we're seeing highly populated, nice sized cities, big lakes, many trees. Okay. Many trees, like I was saying. Where's my tree? Yeah, many trees. See, big trees, very large trees, guys. Okay. And then we have the time dating based on tree rings, which, could be accurate, but there are several species of tree that have multiple rings per year. Okay. So this may not be accurate, but we see the size of these trees. We don't have trees this large anymore. This is a 1,000-year-old tree. Okay. So these things were there. They've all been cut down. We've got nice pictures of our gentlemen with hidden hands, chopping these bad boys down all across the Western United States. So in the logging industry, you would also you would need to use the water to move the logs, right? So if you had that massive lake up there, that would make it very easy to float all of this lumber downstream, get it down to dock down here. So it's more than just mining going on, guys. It's just the reclamation of everything, absolutely everything. All of the natural resources that this area had were just raped, just taken away. Okay. And we see evidence for that in the late 1700s with the Gilded Age and with the modification of many old buildings, the implementation of wooden infrastructure. All that wood would have to come from somewhere. And, instead of thinking, oh, this wasn't possible, the mining wasn't possible, the technology didn't exist, you got to think a little bit bigger than that, everybody. You really do. And I'll get into the technology stuff another time and show you why the technology that was existing at the time just was not disclosed to us. And if it was disclosed in the manner of these expositions. Okay. It was demonstrated through the expositions what they had. And, the robber barons, or those with all of the funds, went to these expositions and decided what they were going to invest their money on. Okay. Because a lot of the infrastructure for building, manufacturing that had existed was, wiped out, was devastated, was just destroyed. Okay. But it wasn't destroyed before it could be infiltrated and the information siphoned off of it. Okay. This was a massively organized effort, all of this. Okay, so back to mining. I went and looked. They had a site here that is the tailing map of the world. This map shows all of the areas that are full of tailings. And wouldn't you know, in the United States, we have, wow, look at that, guys. Tons and tons of tailing piles. 3 up here. See, and these are just the ones that they're showing us, guys. Okay. Detailing a couple, the North Impoundment. So they've got them all like blocked off now. Okay. They're all blocked off in these areas. But look at this, guys. Northern Nevada, 51 different locations. These are just the ones they're telling us, guys. You know, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing, these entire areas are remnants. Okay. So if they're telling us about all this, what are they not telling us? You know, y'all out there are starting to figure out, I'm sure, that we are not told everything that is relevant and pertinent to our health or to our history. So let's go take a look here at these 14 different tailing piles. Look at that. Spread right on out. Look at this, guys. They're everywhere. Some of these 2 in one spot, 10 in another. I mean, they're everywhere, all throughout Nevada. Nevada's a giant wasteland of mining. Okay. Now we're going to take a look at some pictures of mining tailings so that you guys can understand what it is I'm kind of looking at here. Okay. And the coloration. I mean, look at this. Look, does this look familiar to you guys? Any of this? Does this not look like the entire expanse of desert? Tailings, failure of the dam. Okay. This looks exactly like the deserts of America. All of it. Some of these mines. Okay. They're just now looking into a lot of this stuff and saying, oh, well, this is actually tailings, isn't it? Okay. Mining tailings stock photos. This looks like an entire region to me. So what are they telling us, guys? Look at the coloration here. New hope for old mine tailings. Okay. So where they could, they planted forests, covered them up. All right. Where they couldn't, they didn't. Tailings dam fails. Now, if they had these tailings dams in place, if those cities were actually being used to facilitate the mining of these areas, which is definitely what I think about the star cities and about all that, all of those city states had a purpose. It wasn't just for the betterment of, you know, humanity and the population. No, these places were camps. These places were glorified prisons where they held the people that would perform all of this work. Now you see the massive size of the machinery that we have nowadays, but what's being hidden from us is the size of the machinery that existed prior to the Revolutionary War and all the way up until the Civil War. So we're just going to kind of scroll through here and you can see what the dredging looks like, what the tailings look like. They look exactly like what we see out in the deserts, guys. Exactly. Okay. And they're all dammed up and holding these bodies of water. What does this look like to you? This looks like the Salt Lake to me. Okay. You would take fresh water and you would mine with it, and it would soak up the salt, the salinity in the earth, whatever you're washing, and you would end up with this. Hey, welcome to California, guys. Look at that. Right? I mean, you got to at a certain point believe what your eyes are telling you. Okay. Removal of uranium mine tailings, Utah, USA. Look at this. Okay. Don't put it past those in control. Okay. They have the means. They have the technology. They have the ability also to remove or bring people into areas at will. We're seeing this right now. Look at everybody being moved out of, areas in what is now Russia and Ukraine, right? So, I'm just saying, this is not beyond the capability of humanity. Were there larger people involved with all of this? Possibly. Or was it just us little folks getting greedy and deciding to take what the larger folks had? Personally, I think it might be like a combination of the two, or there was, again, some cataclysm in the 1600s. Was it a natural cataclysm? It's looking less and less like any of this stuff that we see as catastrophic is natural. Okay, here's how they do this. The tailings sit underneath the water. They pump the tailings in and they pull the water out. Okay. And it's all just hydraulics, just movement of water. That would make sense to me that that's where all of these lakes have gone, right? I mean, it's not a set in stone kind of thing, but I mean, if you had mining going on here and you had a massive dam here holding all of this mine tailings water back, and you just cut that sucker loose after you were done decimating everything else, create another dam down here further, repeat the process all the way down until it flows into the bay. Okay. So, dig into some information on mining. I mean, why would you go in, and if there was a city that was built like this and was, coated with gold or had a lot of gold infrastructure, um, it would just be so much easier to knock it all down, grind it all up, and process it all out for yourself, because then you can move it wherever you want. You don't have to isolate the city, much like they did in places in the Amazon, and let jungle grow back over it. You can just create yourself a nice inland desert and irrigate what you want to, however you would like. And I mean, look at this, guys. From above, tell me this doesn't all look like wash, right? And oxidation. Okay. Tontoyak, Groom Lake. All right. But this to me, shows that we had some other stuff going on north of here, or up river or upstream, that then flowed down and covered these areas in silt, sediment, sand, so forth. Okay, we can kind of see the outline of what California used to be. Was all of this mined out and then pumped in here? That's another possibility. Okay, so industrialization of this world is not a small scale thing, and it never has been. Look at what's going on in China. If you're paying attention to what's going on in China, the mining, the dams bursting. I mean, we're seeing some smaller scale versions of what may have happened here. All right. So very interesting stuff. And so, and it's notated in several books that Tontiac, existed. We have people from there. And Tontiac and New Albion. Okay. Very interesting stuff. There's a lot of places in the US called Albion. Weird, right? Grid coordinates mentioned in 1677. All right. So, I mean, this is all kind of a lot to to be coincidence, right? It sounds like Tontiac had better constructed buildings as compared to Cibola. After passing this desert, he came to the most charming valley, through which he traveled for 5 days, and which everyone was cultivated like a garden. Everywhere was cultivated like a garden. Villages were scattered all through its extent, being only a league and sometimes half a league apart. In one of these, he found some very intelligent men, from whom he learned still more of Cibola and Tontiac, of the great houses of the former and the sheep and woolen cloth of the latter. In particular, they spoke of the buildings, the streets, and the public places of Cibola, Wishing to test their accuracy, the friars said that it was not possible that houses could be built of the height that they had stated. So they're talking about several story structures, seems. Whereupon they took some earth and some ashes and wet them, and then showed how the stones were laid one on top of the other, and how the building was thus constructed of alternate layers of stone and mortar until it had arrived at its full elevation. Still feigning ignorance, the friar asked whether these men had wings so as they'd be able to fly to the upper stories of the edifice, at which they laughed heartily and drew a picture of a ladder, as well as he himself could have done it, explaining that by this means the upper portions were reached. So, they're saying, hey, man, no, we just go upstairs, right? They said was built of similar houses, but better constructed. So these cities of Cibola may have been more like the Pueblo kind of nation things going on, but Tetontiac was a better construction. Okay, and here's what the city of Cibola was described as. This townsman of Cibola was a white man of good complexion, well advanced in years, and far greater intellect than the inhabitants of this valley or the others left behind. He says Cibola is a great city, inhabited by a great store of people, and having many streets and marketplaces. In some parts of the city are certain great houses, 5 stories high, wherein the chief of the city do assemble themselves on certain days of the year. The houses are of lime and stone. Lime and stone. Limestone? You don't say, right? The gates and small pillars of the principal houses are of turquoises, and all the vessels wherein they are served are of gold. The other 6 cities are like unto this, and Ahakis is the chiefest of them all. So, that's the one. And man, I'll tell you guys, this is the ruins here of an 1879 Union mine shaft in Nevada, looking very much like an underground city, very much, right? So, national parks, military installations, various off-limit areas throughout California, Nevada, and the entire Western United States. So is it really a stretch to look at this and say, hey, wait, this looks exactly like the desert everywhere I've ever been. This looks a lot like the cliff faces in Southern California. I'm just saying, it really does. The crumbly limestone, the pieces of shale filling them in. Okay. So going back to this, guys, and I'm going to dig into some more on mining for you all, and put the stuff out there so we could see that this reset that has happened, this was not a neat, fast, overnight thing. This has taken hundreds of years to where they feel that they have reclaimed enough of this to let people live there again. Okay. Now we do still have lots of mining operations running in the United States and everywhere else. Okay. See, this is an old mine tailing pile here. And, I was watching the thing on Skinwalker Ranch, and that mesa right next to Skinwalker Ranch is just covered in piles like this. Okay. So did they upset something by mining there for all those years? Possibly. Was it really, an Indian casting, doom on people, wishing them, wishing them bad juju? I don't know. Or was it just they mined it out and now they have created some kind of an anomaly there that is messing with people and things? Now, I don't know that I buy 100% the whole Skinwalker Ranch thing, but here's another image of a tailings failure. and look at this, guys. You want mud flood? There you go. Mud flood. Tailings failure equals mud flood. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today, guys. And all right. Yep. So that's where we're going to wrap it up for today. I appreciate y'all tuning in and everything. And we'll have this up on odyssey.com/@redthread podcast, but also on Spotify video. So if you're listening on audio and want to take a look at what we're seeing here, just jump on Spotify, pull it up, video pop right up for you, or head over to Odyssey. But I want to thank you all for tuning in. And once again, this has been Red Thread Podcast. And I'm Random Randy. Have a great day.